Has a short moment ever had a deep impact on your life?
Hey, Kelsey, do you want to be my girlfriend?
Sure.
Sweet.
Oh my gosh, that Brad over there? He's looking fine. Sorry, Dan, we're over.
What you say? That you only meant well, well, 'cause you did. What you say? That it's all for the best, because it is. What you say?
Over the course of human history, a decade is just a drop in a bucket. When you're studying ancient history, a decade can fly by in a paragraph or sometimes even sentences. The Qin Dynasty kind of bucks that trend. Yingzhong became king of the Qin state in 246 BCE at the age of 12 or 13 years old. The Qin was one of the remaining kingdoms at the end of the Zhou Dynasty during the Warring States period. King Zhuang embraced legalism, a type of political philosophy that believes people need strict laws and harsh punishments in order to behave. This also meant he adopted another new concept for warfare called total war. Up until the Warring States period, there were some general rules for war. Opposing armies were allowed to gather on the battlefield, losing armies were treated with dignity, and people who weren't soldiers weren't targeted. King Zhang threw all that out the window. He broke all the rules, he mobilized his citizens, and he was able to unify China. The first thing that King Yingzhong did was gave himself the honorific title Shi Huangdi, which means the first emperor. And then he went about setting up a strong centralized government. He broke from the decentralized feudalism that the Zhou Dynasty had used in favor for a system that gave him final say over everything. And then he forced the nobles to move to the capital city with their families, where he could keep an eye on them and make sure they weren't plotting against him. Because, when you take people's land away, they tend to get upset. Shi Huangdi then divided China up into districts and appointed a governor to each district that answered directly to him. He then further divided those districts into counties, which were each governed by appointed officials. It was this system that allowed him to collect taxes and enforce his strict laws. Books that disagreed with legalism were burned, though Shi Huangdi did save books that dealt with farming, medicine, and predicting the future. In fact, Shi Huangdi's inclination for mysticism is going to come back later.
Foreshadowing!
Any scholars that disagreed with the book burnings, like the 460 that did, were buried alive. Shi Huangdi expanded his empire north into the Gobi Desert and south to the Shi River. And once he would take over a new city, he would have his armies demolish the city walls and take all the weapons to ensure that there wouldn't be an uprising later. Shi Huangdi wanted all of China to be the same. China has a varied geography of mountains and rivers that had divided China into these different regions. And each region had developed their own laws, their own writing styles, and their own currency. Shi Huangdi standardized writing, laws, punishments, currencies, and even weights and measures. He enforced these new standards with harsh punishments. Think I'm starting to see a trend. Because of the standardization, China prospered as trade and communication became much easier. Shi Huangdi believed that projects would help unite the Chinese people. So the Qin Dynasty started many massive building projects during this time. Emphasis on many. To improve transportation, the dynasty built roads. These roads were standardized to 50 paces wide to give the army room to quickly go put down rebellions and defend against invasions. There's a center lane that was left open for the emperor, and the size of wagons and carts were standardized as well to make sure there's enough room for them to pass each other on the roads. Water systems were also improved for both transportation and irrigation by building dams and canals. Also, terraces were etched out of mountain and hillsides to give farmers more room to farm. Some of these terraces and canals are actually still in use in China today. Shi Huangdi had a huge mausoleum or funerary complex built for him. You might recognize these terracotta statues. Discovered in 1974 by Chinese farmers, it consists of several pits of over 8,000 life-size soldiers in battle formation. Besides the soldiers, each with their own unique face and hairstyle, it also consists of 130 war chariots and over 600 horses. It's likely that he believed his army could help him rule and protect his dynasty in the afterlife. But it's apparent he had more plans once he died than just war. We've discovered pits of musicians, acrobats, and even government officials as well. Nearby the pits is the tomb that Shi Huangdi is believed to be buried in. It's said to contain bronze mountains, rivers of mercury, and riches beyond belief. His tomb is yet to be excavated, though. Archaeologists fear exposure to outside air will ruin the priceless artifacts within. That's what happened to the terracotta soldiers. They were all once vibrantly painted, but once they were exposed to air, that paint just flaked off. Probably one of the most famous building projects that was started during the Qin Dynasty is the Great Wall of China. Nomads from the north were fierce warriors, and Shi Huangdi wanted to protect his new empire from them. Certain sections of the wall had already started being built as early as the 600s BCE, but Shi Huangdi had the great idea to connect them all. People who worked on the wall were mostly there by force. Conscripted commoners, criminals, people with tax debt, and soldiers were all forced to work on the wall. Because of the type of work and the terrain they were doing it in, it became known as a place of suffering. There was even rumors started that as people died, they were just buried in the wall. We haven't actually found any evidence of people being buried in the wall, but we have found graves along the wall that do suggest the brutality of the labor. So the Qin Dynasty started building the wall, and subsequent dynasties continued to improve and expand the wall into the structure that it is today. In fact, we still continue to find new sections of it every year. Shi Huangdi became obsessed with his own mortality. Throughout his life, there had been several assassination attempts on his life, though I can't imagine why. So my camera quit recording and I missed a line and I'm too lazy to go upstairs and put on a new tie, so I'm just going to do some terrible animation. Shi Huangdi was so fearful of being assassinated that he spent every night in a new room of his palace. He also hired alchemists and sent out expeditions in search of the elixir of life. Shi Huangdi died in 210 BCE, and we believe he was actually personally on one of these expeditions looking for the elixir of life when he died. Some sources even claim that it could have been a life-preserving potion containing mercury that ultimately killed him. Really makes me wonder about, like, in 2,000 years, what people are going to think that we do now that's just absolutely silly. Following Shi Huangdi's death, his son attempted to rule for 3 years, but was pretty ineffective. The people of the Qin dynasty saw his weakness and rebelled against him, and the dynasty fell in 206 BCE, coming to an end after less than 20 years in power. Because of Shi Huangdi's harsh government, he's not remembered particularly well. His dynasty was overthrown in less than 3 years after his death, and historians tend to paint him in a bad light. One Chinese historian even theorizes that he was an illegitimate child. And I certainly don't mean to downplay any of his harsh practices. Burying people alive and forcing civilians to work in brutal conditions that often resulted in their death is never a good thing. Despite the bleak facts and bad attitudes about the Qin dynasty, China still feels its reverberations today. Off the backs of soldiers and citizens, the Qin dynasty was able to create 2 monuments that China is well known for today, terraces and an irrigation system still in use by Chinese farmers, a system for appointing the best and brightest into governmental positions, and some even speculate that the name China is derived from this dynasty's name, the Qin. Not a bad dynasty's work for just a flash in the pan. Anyways, I hope you're having an awesome week, and until next time, I'll miss you all terribly.